Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I have been looking forward to this for so long. Well, actually, I was with our friend Lisa and she said, "Have you heard of Amy Loughren?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you need to go and watch The Good Nurse." And so we watched that movie, which we'll talk about into this. And I was like, oh my holy God, I've got to reach out to Amy and get her on.
Mm,
That's movie scared the bejesus out of me, and
pretty scary.
I know, and I thought about when I was I don't want to keep talking over you, but when I was in hospital having my thyroid out, and they have this it's called a thyroid kit, because you can bleed out, and it's sitting up on the shelf where I could see it in the middle of the night. I really needed to go to the toilet, and I was buzzing and buzzing and buzzing, and nobody came. And then my brain went to this really dark place, like, holy shit, if I was bleeding out, they wouldn't come and I'd be dead. So I
I
kept
know.
I'm watching the movie thinking, far out. You can be so close. You're teetering on death, without actually knowing. But anyway, so thank you for coming
Yeah,
up.
and it's such a vulnerable place to be, to think about
Yeah,
being in the hospital
yeah,
and needing to trust the nurses,
yeah,
needing to trust that people are going to want to take care of you.
yeah,
And it's the last thing you want to be thinking about is, for one, they're ignoring me and something terrible could happen,
yeah.
or for two, there's something more sinister going on with your nurse.
Yeah. Well, most of us don't think that. We go in there in a state of fear. Like, I don't care what anyone says. You go to hospital in fear, do you? And
Yes.
I've never been to hospital until I was 55, 54. Never in my life.
Wow,
I
lucky you.
I know. And then suddenly I've got to have my throat slit open, and and it's
I'm
like,
sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I'm a nurse. We we laugh at the worst things. I'm so sorry.
no,
There
you
was
can laugh. I laugh
there's
at it
just
all
the way
the
you
time.
said that.
Fine. You can laugh at me, that's fine. But it was kind of like, okay, I just would have liked to have gone in for stitches or something at some other stage, But anyway,
But
but
no, you have to have your throat slit.
yeah. And then, yeah, the whole thing ripped out. So, like, if I'm going to vomit, that's probably the worst operation to start chucking up with. But anyway,
Yeah.
but the woman, there was some woman up there. I went into a private hospital and paid extra just so that I would have good care. I don't know why I bothered. There was a woman up the hallway, and she was just screaming, calling everybody effing this and effing that, and scream. Then the nurse was yelling back at her, and I was just like, well, I'm just gonna lie here and die. I'm laughing now, but I wasn't laughing when I was there.
Yeah, funny, not funny. And being in healthcare here in the States, it's completely different. I can't imagine paying more to go to a different hospital. But
Yeah.
for us, you have to take out a mortgage to be able to go to our hospitals.
Yeah, I know. I know. I often, even in like, I've known about this for a long time because I've been to Hawaii many, many times, and I'm familiar with America and the medical system. My sister was in there with a brain bleed in Hawaii, and
Oh no.
yeah, and insurance wouldn't cover it, and
Oh
it
no.
was yeah, and she ended up dying. Like, we did get her back to
Oh, I'm
Australia.
so sorry. I'm so
Um,
sorry.
yeah, well, thank you very much. Sometimes I say it's okay, but thank you. It's it was a really tough thing, and we couldn't pay, and yeah, it was just really, really
Breaks
awful.
my
But
heart.
uh, we had this one window to get. It's quite an awful story, but she had a brain hemorrhage on the way over on the plane, and we didn't know. She was on warfarin. I didn't know. She was telling me when we were there that she was sick and headachy, which I could see. And I said, what do I need to do? I want to take you to hospital. She said, no, I'm not going to hospital. I just need headache tablets. And I said, well, which one? She said, any. So I went to many chemists. We tried one, didn't work. I went and got another brand, didn't work. What we realized is that the painkillers were actually not supporting the warfarin at all, and she was bleeding, and her brain was bleeding, and it was a it wasn't until it was a week, and actually it was a week. And I said to her, if you're not better by this afternoon, I don't care what you say. I'm taking you to hospital, and I don't care. I'm going to take you against your will. And I did, and they did a CT scan, and it was just horrible. So they gave her a life-saving surgery, they thought, and when they opened her up, her brain was full of tumors, and it wasn't going to happen. And they prepared us for her dying there. But there's just so happened that the surgeon had a good friend in radiology, and he agreed. I have no idea how ethical this is or whatever, but he said, look, it's not a good option, but what we can do is just fry her brain enough that you might be able to get her back to Australia, but it will give her brain damage. And so the options were she was going to die in Hawaii, or we did that extra risk, and we did get all the way back to Australia, and I sat in business class with her because the embassy, did that. And on the way over, she said to me, can you see that angel? Oh, he's so nice. He's so
No
big.
way.
He's so big. He's blue. Look at him, Karen. Look at him. And I said, yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, we're going to lose her midway. And my mum and dad were in the back in economy, and next thing she got diarrhea, and next thing is there any doctors on board? So mum and dad are in the back panicking, what's happened. And we made it. We got to Sydney, and I said, that's it. Straight off, you're on in ambulance straight to hospital. No, I'm going back to Warragul, which is the rural town we lived in. And she said no. So we got her back to Melbourne. I said off. She said no, I'm going back to Warragul. So she made it. She lived for another few months. But anyway, this isn't about my story. This is about your story. But
We've all got a story.
yeah,
We've all got a story.
we have all got a story. I always talk
Yeah.
about need to be kind to people, because you don't know
Yes.
what the hell's
No,
going
you don't. You
on. No.
don't.
So back to your story, Amy, because I've been talking and I want you to talk. In 2003, let's go back there. You were a trauma nurse in the ER, emergency, whatever you call it there. A lazy Buddhist, we'll say, wanting to do more Buddhist work, but absolutely no time because you were a mum and working all these long hours. And you also had a heart issue that was kind of stopping you, well, forcing you to go to work to pay your premium health insurance, but knowing that will kill you at any moment. So what a predicament. But in that year, you're also the centre of a murder investigation. And now I want to talk about this further into the interview because I want people to understand that life can be in a shitty place, but you can turn it around and make a beautiful life for yourself. Now you're a Reiki master, hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, and a whole lot of other things, which we'll get into. And as I mentioned at the start, I watched the Netflix movie, The Good Nurse, and scared the shit out of me. And all that was based around 2003. So now, Amy, I will shut the hell up and you tell us about 2003.
So 2003, I was pretty scared. I was working full time, even though I was only working weekends, I was still working 12, 16-hour shifts. And when I wasn't working, I was home with my kids and barely slept. And during that time, I was extremely ill. And while I was at work, even one time when I was at work, I passed out. And my closest friend at the time essentially saved my life. And that close friend ended up being fired. Once he was fired, I was really, really upset because he was the person that I relied on. He was the person that helped me at work. He was the only person that knew about my heart condition. And I didn't know what I was going to do without him. And then detectives showed up at work. In the movie, it's different.
Yeah.
In the movie, I was still working with him when I found out who he was and what he was doing. But in the real world, I did not know, I did not suspect, And after he was fired and the detective showed up, I found out that he had been killing patients.
Mm.
And as much as that was the biggest shocker for me, it wasn't the worst part of it. The worst part of it was that I saw the evidence and the detectives showed me that evidence so that I could help them with the investigation. And that evidence made it very clear that the hospital knew.
Mm.
They made it very clear that I was working in a situation where the hospital was making it more important to make money than it was to help their patients remain safe.
Wow.
So I assisted with the investigation, and the worst part of it was hiding it from the hospital because the hospital was shredding evidence and the hospital was working against us at all costs so that they were not held liable.
Wow.
Charles Cullin, who murdered between 400 and possibly even 1,000 patients.
Wow.
Um, he had been working at 9 different hospitals, and 5 of those hospitals knew that he was at least probably harming patients, but mostly did know that he was murdering patients and sent him to the next hospital with a neutral reference.
Wow.
And my hospital was the last one because eventually, after working undercover with the detectives, I was able to wear a wire and I was able to get a confession out of him.
Mm.
And he is now serving, I'm making up the number, I believe it's 17 life sentences.
Mm.
He admitted to murdering approximately 40 people. The only reason that it's that low is because those are the people that he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt. He remembers their name, he remembers their circumstance, he remembers how he murdered them. And the rest of them, he could not be certain that they did not die. They were very sick patients. They were in the ICU. They were critically ill. They could have had multi organ failure, which caused their death. He cannot be certain that their death was caused by what he did. Although he murdered, I believe it was 20 patients in the year and a half that I was working with him, that we know of. And we know that he attempted within that period of time, attempted at least 300 murders during that
Oh,
time.
wow.
So he was a cold-blooded murderer. He was not a mercy killer. He was not looking at these patients like they needed to cross over, and he couldn't stand their suffering, even though during his confession he did say that.
Mm.
We
Mm.
know the types of medications that he used. None of them were to put people to sleep. All of them were meant to harm. And there were times also, there were witnesses that survived his attempted murder who said that they told them that he was going to kill them.
Oh,
So he was not a mercy killer, even though I wanted to believe that he was. And in the
God.
movie, I think that they tried to get that right. I think they tried to make it very clear,
Mm.
that he was not trying to help people.
Mm.
He murdered people that were on the mend. In fact, one of his first victims was only 18 years old and she was ready for discharge.
Yeah.
So he never meant to do anything except something sinister with those patients.
Mm. He had a like he lost his mum, and and like you said, the movie is different. And I also watched the documentary Catching a Killer Nurse as well, and I noticed some differences. I've just picked up the book. I incorrectly ordered it from America, and it cost me nearly $100. So I'm sure
Oh
it's going
my
to be.
gosh.
I'm sure it's going to be a good read. I started reading it.
You should have told me. I would have sent
No,
you one.
It's all right. I wanted to read it before I talk to you, and I can't. It's every time I read a chapter, I'm like, oh, holy shit, and particularly
It is holy shit.
the Burns chapter. I put it
I
down,
know.
and I was white, and my partner says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Fuck. Do you know what they do to Burns victims?" And she said, "No. Do I want to?" And I said, "No. For Christ's
No.
sake, stay away from fire. For God's sake, stay away from fire." And so if everyone's curious about that, go get the book, read it. You'll absolutely nearly throw up, but I'm sure it's a great read, and I can't wait to read through it. But I'm going to chip at it with my soft little heart.
Yeah, Charles Graeber spent so much time getting it right.
Yeah,
And that book, it reads like a novel, even though it's a beautiful, beautiful book written by someone who really cared to get it
yeah,
right. And
yeah,
he did. He
yeah.
definitely got it right.
So you think the book is the most accurate account of what happened?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is the most accurate account of Charles Cullin that you will ever lay your hands on. He spent, I think, in at least in prison, when he went to talk to him in prison to do his research, I think no, I'm certain he saw Charles Cullen in prison more than I did. I was able to visit him in prison. Um, so he spent a lot of time talking to Charlie and a lot of time figuring out what his mental health status was.
Mm,
And much more so than I did, much more so. Charlie was very, how do I say? I think that he was very good at playing a role. He
mm,
was extremely performative in wanting to be the hero and
yeah.
specifically wanting to be my hero.
Yeah.
And that was all that I knew of him. But the
Mm,
murderer was not the person I knew. I met the murderer, but it was not the friend I knew. It was not my friend Charlie. And he
mm.
was a completely different person.
I was going to say there, and I just want to come back to that. But his mother died, and so like a lot of the portrayals in the movies is that sort of hit him hard, and it's so it could be that has turned him, like, really affected his mental health so much so that he's bitter enough to kill people. But it also could be that he was born with it. Like, do you have a thought of which of those it could be, or if not, if neither?
I think it does come down to nature versus nurture.
Mm,
And I know that for many reasons, the way that he processed that type of trauma was not the way that I processed trauma.
mm,
My trauma was different, but I had very serious trauma in my life as a child. And that led me to want to protect people
mm,
because I was not protected.
mm,
And him having that lack of protection turned him to want to murder the people that were harming him.
mm,
So I don't know. I don't know why his brain went there and mine didn't. I don't know. I don't know if it was because I had a different type of support system in my life and I had really good friends. He did not. He was very
mm,
socially awkward. Possibly that's why, we don't know.
mm.
So, was he born that way? Perhaps. I don't know if we'll ever know.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think that no matter what, like that, we can find the reason. And you and I could do this for an hour, go back and forth, back and forth. But at the end of the
Yes.
day, there's no excuse. It's kind of like
Yes.
we're
Yes, of course.
intrigued with
Of
a
course.
reason. It's like, wonder
Well,
why.
I think what it comes down to is really us as humans. I think we want to know because I think that there's always that question inside of us
Mm,
that we know each one of us has had hardships.
mm,
And we want to believe that our hardships led us to something beautiful
mm,
because that gives us a wonderful story, doesn't it?
yeah.
Whereas when we look at people, and I think that's why it's so fascinating looking at people like Charlie Cullen, is because he went in a direction that we could not think of. And we're
Mm,
fascinated by that. We're
yeah.
fascinated that they decided to do things with their hurt, the hurt within them, to hurt other people. And
Mm,
I think we question that. I think we question, hey, why didn't I do that? Am I better than this person? Does it mean
mm,
that I am more capable than this person? Does it mean that I'm more spiritually adept?
mm,
I think that we're always asking those questions when in reality we don't know. We don't know
mm,
if the way that they processed it was something that is a natural thing that we are trying to grow out of as a human race,
mm,
or if, was he just the animal part of him just took over. And so,
mm,
anyway, again, we could talk about this
mm.
for days and
Yeah.
not come up with an answer.
No, I know, and it is fascinating. I'm with you that human behavior, two people can experience something similar and yet take completely different paths, and it
Yeah.
fascinates the hell out of me. But at the end of the
Yes.
day, as I said, there's never an excuse.
No.
We can come to the
No.
end and say, ah, right, that's the reason. But it's
No.
never an excuse to harm another
It's
person.
never an excuse.
No. So, when you said that, Charles Graeber went into, in prison and met with him several times, you said you did too. Well, I've got two questions. Why did you go and visit him, knowing he's a killer? And two, did you feel betrayed did you want to, because he was your great friend, and then you felt betrayed by him, which I'm sure you did you go in there hoping to find something different or someone different, or I don't know, what were the feelings like going into prison, and why?
I went to see him because Charles Graeber and I were working with 60 Minutes,
Yeah.
and we were going to be doing an interview with him. And so it was really getting to that stage of being able to do those interviews. And Charles Graeber, who wrote the book The Good Nurse, wanted me to go and see him. And up until that point, I had not. I had not written to him. I had not thought about talking to him. I never watched anything about the trial, nothing. And I was a confidential informant. No one knew who I was. I wanted as far away from it as I could
Mm,
possibly get. So when he brought it up, thinking about actually seeing him again, I wasn't concerned about the feelings of betrayal that he had, or that I felt toward him. I was concerned that he would feel that betrayal from me
mm,
because, like I said, I did not know the murderer.
mm,
I only knew my friend Charlie, and I put my friend Charlie in prison.
mm,
I know, and I know intellectually he had murdered people. I understood that he needed to be held accountable, but I was his friend. And I was his friend in a way that when you trauma bond, when you work together in that way, it's very much the same way that policemen bond or soldiers
mm.
bond, or you bond in ways that you can't describe.
Yeah.
And you always want to have their back. And the fact was, I lied to him.
Mm,
I lied because I was working undercover, and all of a sudden he was going to know that, and I didn't want him to know. There was a piece of me that still wanted to have my friend Charlie. He didn't exist. My friend Charlie didn't exist.
yeah.
My friend Charlie was someone that it was a role that he played.
Mm,
And I wanted to believe that he was a mercy killer so that I could give up the guilt that I had for not seeing it
yeah.
sooner. So seeing him in prison was more that I was curious. I wanted to ask him questions. I wanted to ask him why. And
Mm,
also, I wanted to find out, did I hurt patients? He used to inject medications into our IV bags, and then we would take those IV bags into patients' rooms and unknowingly poison them
mm,
from the concoctions that he had in those IVs. So I wanted to know if he had murdered people and somehow I was accidentally involved. I didn't get any of those answers. I didn't get a question to the why. I didn't get an answer to anything that I asked him, really. The only thing that I did understand very early on is that the performative part of him, of being my friend, was something that we both used to have that friendship and to have that
Mm.
surface level friendship. And he needed it as much as I did.
Yeah. Did you feel afterwards, did you feel shame? Like, and this is just a perfectly human emotion. Did you feel
Oh, yeah.
like embarrassed or
Yeah.
ashamed that somebody had tricked you or had somehow caused you to participate, or to be part of that show? Like, did you?
I felt more than anything, I felt a lot of shame for still caring about him.
Mm,
And I felt not embarrassment for not knowing sooner. I had a lot of self loathing
mm,
for feeling like I had participated even unknowingly. I was very upset with myself, and I had a lot of mental health issues afterwards because it wasn't just shame, it was much deeper than that.
mm,
I blamed myself for so much of it, even, and intellectually, of course, I knew that it wasn't my fault,
mm,
but I didn't see it. He was murdering people right in front of me and I didn't see it. And that goes beyond any type of embarrassment. That goes
mm,
straight into why didn't I see it?
mm,
And looking for answers to that led me on a beautiful path.
mm,
And although that part of me that had that self-loathing, that drew me to finding other answers of why me, why did I end up befriending a serial killer, and why was it me that was able to put him away?
mm,
And I loved finding those answers,
mm,
and I was able to find those answers,
mm,
and I was able to put that behind me and change my life. So even the worst thing that ever happened to me became one of the most beautiful journeys I've ever had in my life.
mm. They say that happens often, and again, though, I wonder if it's about what we were talking about before. It's just some of us are built to go, well, I've had adversity and now let me turn that into something beautiful, whereas others take the adversity and completely smash themselves and become drug addicts and alcoholics and
Right, right.
self-harmers. So potentially, like this, it even becomes more fascinating, is you've hit
It
on it
does.
again. Is who am I? Who am I? What is that strength in me? What is that thing in me that keeps me on that more optimistic path? But I was just talking to my partner yesterday. We were driving home from a holiday, and I said, do you know, I'm really thinking a lot about how mental health impacts physical health and how physical health impacts mental health, and they're not disconnected, and there's still so much shame around mental health. We talk about that, and
Yes.
we talk, because I saw a post on LinkedIn from a doctor that takes depression medication or mental health medication, and he said, we talk about the physical health and we're all fine with that, and we all have empathy for people with a physical health, a physical ailment, and we're okay. But as soon as we talk about mental health, there was, oh no, I don't want to talk about that. And maybe it's invisible, but there are still some medical, physical conditions that are invisible. Like, we can't go down there. But as I was saying, my partner, we talk about physical health and we're okay with that. We talk about gut health and we're okay with that. Gut health is so important to our brain. I said, why do we call it mental health? Why don't we call it brain health? Because it is part of us. And if we all have good brain health, because there's such negative connotations attached to the mental side of it, but anyway, irrelevant to all that is, I'm curious, you had your heart issue when all this was happening, and as you said, Charlie saved your life. You collapsed and he got you back on track, and he was the only one that knew about it. You had to keep working because you had to pay your uh, health
Health insurance.
insurance. So when all this happened, so you're talking now about, it was so bad for my mental health when this happened, and me talking about that, how they overlap and they feed each other. What happened to your heart when, like, when all this, because the way I say it, if I was in this, all this, and I had a heart condition, I reckon I'd probably freaking die. I reckon my heart would just say, fuck this shit, I'm out. I can't do this. It's way too hard. So what happened with your heart when you went through all that?
I was so determined to be with my daughters that I was willing to literally do anything to save my life because I did understand what would happen or what could happen emotionally to my daughters if they
Mm,
lost me at such a young age.
mm,
And it was really more about their mental health that
mm,
helped me to get better. And not just physically, which I did get physically better. Emotionally, I knew I had to get my shit together
yeah.
because they were counting on me. And did I have a broken heart? I wonder.
Mm,
did I have a
mm,
broken heart? And I don't know. And I do think that energetically, that's probably what it was, is
mm,
that I went through years of not wanting to live. And it wasn't that I went, to that dark place of I want to do something to end my life.
mm,
It was more, I don't want to wake up. Yes, it was too hard. I don't want to wake up. I would be fine with just going to sleep and not waking up ever again. But I never would have harmed myself, especially for my children. I would
mm,
never do that to them. So fighting for my life, fighting for my mental health was really about someone else. Once again,
mm,
that's how it all started. I couldn't do it for myself. I
mm,
had to do it for someone else. And I don't know. I think energetically, we can talk about things like I didn't even want to talk about that I had physical issues, talking about emotional issues. I would never have told anyone, and
mm,
I think also that stigma is very it's it's a curiosity to me, but people tend to not trust you as much
mm,
when they know that you're struggling emotionally or mentally.
yeah,
They're afraid to lay too much on you, so they tend
mm,
to hold things back.
yeah,
They're also afraid that you may respond in a way that they would be uncomfortable with.
mm,
So, once again, they keep things from you.
yeah,
And so it becomes extremely isolating, very,
yeah,
very isolating.
mm,
And yeah, I think that it's a trust issue. I think that if we only show strength, then we're not going to be abandoned.
mm, yeah. So did you get your heart? Did you get something done to it? Like, was there an action,
I did.
like a procedure or something done to get it? Because you don't have your heart issue now. So what?
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do.
I'm actually wearing
Oh,
a special heart monitor right now. So I
oh,
still have a heart issue still.
oh.
Um, but yes, I ended up having an experimental procedure that was supposed to only last about 5 to 10 years to keep me off of the transplant list. And
Wow.
it has lasted, this year it will be 19 years that it has kept me off the transplant list. But
Wow.
we always knew that there was going to have to be something, to follow that up.
Mm,
And I'm in that phase right now where I've had 19 years. I've had, so much time that that physician, that wonderful, amazing, brilliant cardiologist at the Cleveland Clinic gave me so many years with my daughters that now they're grown, they're taking care of themselves. And it's easier for me now. It's
mm,
easier for me to say, okay, if something happens now, I know that they can take care of themselves. And I
yeah.
know that we've had enough conversations now that they know how much I love them. They are very established emotionally. So
Mm,
of course it would hurt them
yeah,
if I wasn't here, but it would have been a lot different if they
yeah,
had been only 6 and 11,
yeah,
if something had happened to me back when I was diagnosed. So
yeah.
yes, I had an experimental procedure which lasted me all these years.
Wow. Well, one, that's impressive. But I still don't know how you got through that without it knocking you over. But I think, I think also you're talking about, having meaning and purpose, and the purpose being your daughters, and I really think that is such a strong driver of whether we survive things or not, or whether we get up the next day. And I really reckon the way we think, our attitude drives our physical health as well. And if we're saying, well, life's not worth it, there's nothing here, it's likely that we're going to not have a good outcome. But anyway, so now I'm really interested in this. You said before, I'm just thinking, do I have any more questions about Charlie's? Not going to bother you. I think that you said he's got 17 life sentences. I think it's more that I read, but anyway, it's irrelevant. He's got that many consecutive life sentences that he will spend the rest of his life in jail. Does that give you at least breathing space? Does that give you the fact that, what, I can talk about it, I can breathe, I'm never in danger, my kids are never going to be in danger? Like, do you think that gives you that kind of relief?
Um, Interestingly enough, I never really had much fear in that area. I think also because I knew that I, I don't know why I didn't have fear in that area. It was more that I wanted to make sure that I did not mess up the investigation.
Yeah, yeah,
And I wasn't really allowed to talk about it. I worked undercover, so no one knew my name. I think it was more when Charles Graeber was writing the book and I was given the okay to talk to him about my story, that I was just really concerned that somehow I would say something that would get him out of
you
jail. Not
oh,
not that I was worried about myself. I
yeah.
was worried about that investigation. I was worried about it for the victims themselves and their families. So no, I that's the only reason that I was concerned.
Mm. Wow. One last thing on Charlie, because I want to talk about your healing journey, is I saw in that, what was it called? Catching a Killer Nurse, in that documentary. I saw, and I don't know whether,
Capturing the Killer Nurse.
yeah, have you watched that? I mean, yes, you have now. Okay. In that,
So
oh, go. No, go.
yeah, so I have watched it twice only because I had to give approvals for a few things. And I did watch it twice, and I feel it's more chilling than the movie.
Yeah, me too. Yep. And because you actually see him, you see his reactions. And the bit I was going to mention was in the courtroom, and families of the victims were standing there in front of him saying, you took away my whatever brother or whatever, and
Yes.
you have no, you do you know the pain that's caused? And he just sat there completely blank. And I was in tears. I was watching it, think, oh my God, how do these people face him like that, and talk about their loved ones, and particularly the healthy loved ones, like you said, the ones that were ready to be released and suddenly not making it. And I don't know. That's, to me, when I was watching the movie, I kind of saw him as a real troubled, isolated, a lot of pain from his losing his mother,
Yeah.
yeah, potentially, an autistic sort of, probably on the spectrum, that kind of stuff. And I felt a little bit of empathy, even though completely no acceptance of what he was doing. But when I watched the documentary, I switched and I went, far out. You're hearing that hundreds of people have died that you know this anyway. You're not nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's
Well, I think who you saw was the person I didn't know, and
yeah,
that was the murderer. So
yeah,
who you saw was a very smug narcissist who does not have any concept of someone else's lives or how it affects them.
mm,
He has no empathy. He can feign empathy. He can pretend friendship. He can want to make people believe that he cares about them. But when it comes right down to it, who he really is was that cold blooded murderer. And he was
mm.
pretending to be those other people.
It's funny you should say that. I was just away on the weekend, and the book I was reading was dealing with narcissists, liars, manipulators, and bullies, or something like that. And as you're saying stuff, I'm thinking, oh my God, that was exactly what I was reading, about particular
Yeah.
narcissistic types. And so tell me about this healing journey. So this was 20 years ago, and we can't just say 20 years ago, it's in the past, it's forgotten, because when something is so traumatic like that, it never leaves you. Like, this just sits under the surface, and you've got to find ways to heal. Otherwise you would be obsessed with it. It would just override every mental thought every thought you're having. When you said you went through this journey of questioning why, and now 20 years on, you're doing some great stuff, which I want to talk about next. But how long did it take you to, like, how long were you sitting in this questioning, self-loathing, I have to find an answer but I can't yet? How long did you sit in that phase for?
I sat in until I was physically healthy enough to really go on that spiritual quest, because up until that point, I had one goal, and that was to stay alive.
Mm,
And then once I realized, okay, I'm not dying, now we have to think about my brain and my emotional health here.
mm,
Let's go. And so I started very traditional talk therapies. I started very traditional types of cognitive therapies to help me. I started medications. And I realized that it was just lacking, and I wasn't getting to the heart of what was really happening with me. So I started studying hypnotherapy. I started studying meditation. And that led me down these paths to all of these different modalities,
mm,
to modalities like quantum healing and reconnective healing and Reiki, and
mm,
even more mystical shamanic type of healing strategies, and going there in the darkness and doing shadow work and working with Byron Katie and the work. It was like every single piece that I would pick up, it was a key to the
mm,
next healing phase.
mm,
And it just opened me and opened me and opened me until we come to a couple of years ago, and I found out they're making a movie. And through that, I knew that I would end up with some kind of a platform, whatever it is, that
mm,
15 minutes, it's not 15 minutes of fame anymore, it's 15
mm.
seconds.
Yeah,
And I wanted to be very intentional about what I used that for,
yeah,
because I wanted to make sure that the families and that the the aftermath of having all of those victims, I wanted them to know that what I was using that platform for was good.
yeah,
And so much of my healing journey included retreats, which is how I met your friend Liesel.
yeah, yeah.
And when I went on these retreats, recently, in fact, I was in Cairns. I don't say it correctly. I know I say it American.
Karen?
Cairns.
Oh,
Yeah,
Cairns. Oh, they were saying my name.
Cairns.
Cairns, yeah.
Cairns.
Cairns, yeah.
And so while I was there at a retreat, I was speaking there, and I decided to go through one of their practices that they were teaching. And it just moved me so much that I realized I needed to do these
Mm.
for healthcare workers.
Yeah.
So I have partnered with the retreat specialists of Australia, Lisa Albrecht,
Yeah.
and we are now developing these amazing conferences for healthcare workers to sample and to feel cared for,
Yeah.
and to deal with their own cumulative trauma from what they have sustained through all kinds of institutional abuses.
Mm.
And really to once again help them to feel strong so that they can feel more resilient and they can hopefully have a better feeling about themselves as well as their lives. And
Mm.
also put in a bit of fun mysticism in there and do some spiritual practices like what I went through with shamanic healing and tarot cards and really fun stuff
Yeah.
that maybe people would not think about using them to help their mental health, but it does open up this trust within your own intuition.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. That's what I'm using my platform for. And
Yeah.
it's what I'm so proud of this.
Yeah. And that, by the way, you didn't mention the name of it, but it's a most important person. So MIP, is it
Most
MIP
important patient.
retreats? Oh, most
Most
important
important
patient. That's
patient.
right. Is it
Yeah. So
MIP
yes,
retreats? Is that what it's called?
yes.
Yep.
So you are your most important patient when you're a
Yeah.
healthcare worker. The last person you are usually caring for is yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is MIP, most important patient conferences and retreats.
I think that is incredibly important. And nurses tend to be, a lot of healthcare workers tend to be self-sacrificial. I will just put everybody else first, and like you
Yes.
were in the movie, it's just like, I know I've got a heart problem, but I've got patients to care for. And I think that nurses in particular, they do, like you said about the abuse, and I think that not many people realize this, that even that time I was just explaining being there, the abuse, it is incredible. And I recognize that comes from a place of fear, but that is vicarious trauma. You take that and take that and take that. And after years, I know you can say, well, that's just part of the job, but that has to be on a cellular level, has to be sort of adding up and adding up and adding up and adding up. And I think it would be easy for a nurse to say, or a healthcare professional to say, I don't need to look after me, like I'm fine. But I think when you're talking about even the fun little practices, I think even just cracking them open a tiny bit, then they start to notice, shit, i didn't
Exactly.
i
Yep.
didn't
Yep.
see that. I didn't.
Yes.
Yeah. and
Yes.
it's and
Exactly.
I think that's bloody fantastic that you're doing that. I have a question. You've written in. Oh no, let me say the things that you do anyway, and all of these things are part of everything that you do. So Reiki master, hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, meditation instructor, dream sculptor practitioner, reconnective healer, integrative energy healer, past life regressionist, crystal language reader, medical intuitive. You've also talked about tarot cards and all that kind of stuff. One of them I'm interested in, a dream sculptor practitioner. What is that? I'm so curious.
So it's a type of neurolinguistic programming where you take each aspect of your life and focus on each pillar of that type part of your life so that you aren't just going for one piece of your life. Let's say, you wanted to talk about fitness and you can't get past your fear of the gym.
Yeah.
And so you go through their past and figure out what those triggers are. And
Mm,
we fix that part of their life. We
yeah.
fix, now they want to go to the gym, but now they're becoming impulsive and spending too much money.
Yeah.
So dream sculpting is more about taking each one of those pillars of your life
Yeah.
and dealing with each one of those pillars, because if you go out of balance, you start
Yeah.
to fix one part of your life, another part of your life decides that it also needs some attention. So
Yeah.
when you do all of them together, you can balance that out.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that. We should just say that fixing, none of us are broken. None of us are broken. We
I
have
love
little,
that. You're right. Yes,
we
yes.
have
And I
broken
think
little bits, but
I
we're
agree. I
not
agree.
broken.
I
Yeah.
agree. And
You weren't saying we were. I'm just saying it that
yeah, no, that is very true. And in fact, it's one of the things that I always say. And I think that is also a misconception that we can fix certain things.
yeah.
And it's still like even a habit of mine to say that word, but you are right. We are not broken. And we think that, and when we're talking about actually I don't even like the word healing, because even when you feel like you're healing something, again, it's that sense that you're broken.
Mm,
And it's actually that trauma, sometimes, if we look at it, that trauma that leads us onto the path that is beautiful.
mm,
And uh, I look at every part of my life as it led me to something beautiful.
mm,
People have different types of trauma, and people can deal with their trauma in whatever way they want.
mm,
And if it is that dealing with their trauma means that they need to do something to help their own anxiety, then you meet them where they are.
yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they have to be fixed. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It
No.
just means that's where they are in their journey. And that is a beautiful place as well.
Mm. And I think if you look at it visually, like if you try to imagine it, on a deeper level about a person, and you're talking about these pillars in one area. I mean, we've all got stuff in all areas, but I kind of imagine it like it's stuck. Do you know? So it's this, like, just one part there is just stuck, and it's stuck in a trauma from the past. And as
Yeah,
you say,
yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't mean broken. It just stuck, and it just needs a little bit of help prying it. So if it was like this, just needs a little bit of help prying it
Yep.
open,
Just
and
opening,
let's
opening,
go again.
opening.
Yeah. And
Yes.
we get ashamed, or I was going to say embarrassed again. I don't know why I'm stuck on those two words but today, but it's kind of like whenever something is stuck or like that, we do think we're not good enough, and I'm not okay. But every single, and we also think about trauma as a big freaking motherfucker. Well, I was in a big
Yeah.
accident, I had my leg cut off, or someone shot me, or something like that. But in actual fact, every time our body experiences some kind of jolt, that's a trauma. It may only be a little one, or we have an emotional jolt. Somebody so out of the blue told me they cheated on me. That's a trauma. And
It
I
is
think,
traumatic. It is because,
yeah,
and you have a physical response to that.
yes. And we hold it, and it's kind of like, well, it's too hard. I just suppress that. And if we could just see that we've all got little traumas, and some have big traumas, and it doesn't matter the size, that we've all got a past. And some people say, move on from the past, don't look back. But I kind of think sometimes we do have to go back and say, well, what is that thing? I had a money blockage, a real huge money issue, and I did some therapy on it with a lady from I can't remember the state she's in. Anyway, Lisa, top of America, can't think of the state, but and it came back to some epigenetics with my mother, who lost her little sister when she was 19. My mum was 19 when
Mm.
she lost her younger sister, and she felt worthless. And she carried that into me through the womb, through my birth, and I've carried that all my life. And I was embarrassed about that. I was ashamed of it. I was like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why do
Yes.
I have a money
Yes.
problem? And
Yes.
now
And
it's
money is very associated with shame, very
yeah,
much so.
and now it's healed. I don't have the problem,
That's
but it's
great.
it takes a lot of guts, though. Like, it really takes guts, and we've got this, like I was talking
No,
about.
Karen, though, yeah, and not to interrupt you,
No,
but I interrupted you.
sorry.
So the other thing is we don't have to heal if we don't want to. there's the other part of it is that we don't have to move forward on our journey. We don't have to do any of those things. If
Mm.
you are in a place where you are functioning, you are doing things in your life that are okay, you don't have to change.
Yeah.
You don't have to change everything in your life. You don't have to be thinking about those things.
Yeah.
And I think that even when you're not on that continuous quest like I was, you can still be growing and not even doing it consciously. Like
Yeah.
even people that are listening to this, it could just be a curiosity that they have that
Yeah.
kind of started to stir within them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean they have to change. There's nothing wrong with them. It
Yeah.
just means maybe you're curious.
Yeah. And I also think, though, that a lot of that change comes from external comparisons. It's kind of like
Sure.
we feel like there's an expectation from somebody else that I'm not as good as them, and therefore I have to change something
Yes,
about
yes,
myself. And
absolutely.
I don't,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I don't agree with that. I think it has to be about our internal happiness. If we've got a stirring, if we've got an internal quest, follow that. If we don't, that's freaking fine too. But we should not be doing it to measure up to somebody else's.
Yes, yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, actually, measure two parts of that. I always say two parts of that. Measure up to someone else's expectations, but not only that, our perceived thoughts that they have those expectations, because half the time they don't have those expectations. It's us judging ourselves, that they must be looking at me like I'm shit. but
Yes, and isn't that true? I
yeah,
like I'm always so conscious of the people in my head
yeah,
because it's the nebulous they. Well, who
yeah,
is they? They will think these things. Who's they?
yeah.
Like we make up these people.
There's a great saying too. You wouldn't worry so much about what people said. What? No, no. Start again. You wouldn't worry so much about what people thought about you if you realised how little they actually did. So we spend all this time worrying about other people, but they're not even bloody thinking about us. They're too busy worrying about dinner.
I know.
Oh, I love it. So you also said this. I'm going to quote you out of your bio here. I now have created a life filled with abundance, exotic travels, and beautiful relationships. My amazingly full and adventurous life was created through a deep understanding of this matrix we live in. I love the word matrix there, and I recognize how many connections there are energetically throughout the world. How would you explain that in a way that it would just make sense to people?
So it is very much that we have a connection to every single person we have an interaction with.
Mm.
And you can think about it almost as let's just say a spider web,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
we are constantly weaving this beautiful web, this
Mm.
intricate, gorgeous web. And one tiny little movement on one part of that thread can spread across,
Yeah.
and it is, to me, it is the weaving of our lives, and then those webs start to come together. Our web, my web now is intertwined with your web,
Yeah.
and it's everywhere. And I apologize for any of the arachnophobes in the but I
Yeah.
just think that the intricacies of how we are
Mm.
connected,
Yeah.
and as I'm talking to you, the people that are listening to this, I'm now connected to all of them,
Yeah.
and they are connected to me.
Yeah.
And everything that we do is
Mm.
so interconnected. And when I talk about the matrix as well, it is very much about seeing this world as, and we can go as deep as you like, but it is very much about perception and being this hologram. and being in this holographic universe,
Yeah.
that we get to be this beautiful avatar, this
Mm.
wonderful avatar, this body that we are in, like being in a video game.
Yeah.
And we get to choose. We really get to choose what we want to do. We think that we don't have choices,
Yeah.
especially when things are going very bad.
Yeah.
We think that those things have been inflicted on us, when in reality, those things are the things that we then get an opportunity to see where that connection goes.
Yeah.
So that is my matrix.
Well, I love that matrix. I absolutely love it. And it's so true you say about choice. And I hear so many people say, I don't have a choice. And I always say, you're never stuck. You're never stuck. There is always a next step. And sometimes it's hard. And sometimes that next step is something that we think, oh, I don't know if I can do. I have this analogy, and I love your spiderweb analogy. It reminds me of that saying, oh, what a wicked web we weave when at first we practice to deceive. It's like, don't bloody.
Or it's like Charlotte's Web.
Yes.
Charlotte's Web. Yes, it's one of my favorite books of all time.
I love it. It's such a good. I was just about to say another analogy, and now I forgot. Doesn't matter. I was about the Matrix. No, I can't remember. Oh, choice, and it's. I think that if we you were talking about it like being an avatar and a thing. I often say life's a game, and I don't mean it's a game as in we play with each other. Do you know that we've got the right to just be, shooting each other down or whatever, like some avatar games, but it
Right.
really is a game of life that we can control. And sure, you're going to get physically ill, you're going to get all these things, car accidents and stuff are going to happen. But our choice is that we are the creator of our life. We are the creator of the outcomes, and it's all about the choices that we make. And I get it that that's not a friggin' easy thing to do, but we're not victims, and we're not held unless we're physically held hostage by somebody. Our minds are incredible machines that send us down a negative part when our negative bias just tells us everything's bloody wrong. But we've actually got the capacity. This. You're smiling because you know this. We've got the capacity, to make the decisions that are positive. We've got the capacity to not be a victim. And it's just because our whole lives, the minute we were walking, we got smacked on the hands. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. Sit down, shush, be quiet, get back in your seat. Our whole lives through education, whatever, has been told us that we have to obey the rules, and they're someone else's rules, whether they suit us or not. And we have to compete, and we're not good enough unless we reach levels. And obviously, we take that into adulthood, and we're already fucked by the time we're adults. We're completely messed up. But we forget that. Hang on a minute, this is somebody else's man-made rule. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we have a complete hell, I've lost the word, anarchy. Where we all don't follow any rules. It's not what I'm saying. But for ourselves, we're our own managers. We really are. But
We are.
you know that. Now, have you found peace?
Oh, yes. Oh,
That's a big.
yes. Absolutely have found peace. And the peace that I have found does not look like peace every day.
Yeah.
What it looks like is that I have tools and treasures now that can lead me back to peace quicker.
Yeah.
So I know where it is, I know where it lives, and I have access to it. It
Mm.
doesn't mean it's like that every day.
No. Well, it can't be because there are external factors going on all the
Yeah, and that
time.
would be awfully boring.
It would
I
be.
don't, I don't want to be a monk sitting in a cave. I want the experiences that are emotional and
Yeah.
that still expand me.
Mm.
And today I learned something about it's something that I had said, and I know what I meant, and it wasn't taken that way. And I felt so sad and perplexed. And I thought, how beautiful is this that
Mm.
I feel sad and perplexed?
Yep.
It gives
Yep.
me an opportunity to grow and then move back to peace again.
I so agree. And by the way, young yogis and monks sitting in caves, they still get birds nesting in their hair. That can't be pleasant.
You
But
know what? I don't think that we evolve into
no,
Buddhist monks. You know what I think? I think that that's how we all start out in this game. We
yes,
start out as the Buddhists and monks
yep,
because what I would like to see is them living this life of dealing with a serial killer
yep,
and then finding peace.
yep,
Let's do that. Let's
yep.
have a toddler screaming in your ear and let's see if you can find peace. Because to me, that's level 30. But
Yeah.
sitting in a tree and not having to worry about anything
Uh,
and people giving you food, that's not a place I want to be.
no, I agree, and I always say about I want to feel the feels. Do you know?
Yes.
People say I'm a really passionate person, and I get really angry about stuff. And
Yes.
I fucking do. Do you know some things that just I crack the shits big time. And I always say I want to feel that. I want to feel
Yes.
every
Go
emotion.
there.
Yeah,
Go
I
there.
do. Even if it's terrible, I want to feel it because on the other
Oh,
end of it, I feel the joy. Do you know? I feel the utter excitement of joy,
yes.
and I would hate to miss either. And
Right.
because it,
Yes.
it's like someone explained it to me once. It's like and I don't remember. Maybe John D. Martini. I can't remember anyway, but it was like a if you only have this much on the positive or this much on the negative, you'll only have this much on the positive. If you have this much on the negative, you'll have this. So it's like a quantum physics. You talked about that before. There has to be an equal amount on either side. And if we try to keep it so that we're not feeling any pain, we never feel joy either. So that the more pain we feel and the more I'm going to say negative, but I don't see it as negative. I think it's just that's just what we call it. The more I'm over to the right, the more I'm going to go over to the left, and the more I'm going to swing around. And I know some people can't handle that, but I want to feel it because when I bloody skid into my grave, I want to say I bloody lived. I lived every inch of life, and by Christ, it hurt, but I still want to feel it. And that's where you grow.
Same.
And
Same.
I love you saying about I know the same because I hear you saying the peace. I love that bit about peace. Life of peace isn't about going around and everything's just bloody not lovely because that's ho hum. But to find peace, and like you said, it's the quicker you come back to it, the quicker you can grow and then go,
Yes.
you know what?
Yes.
I don't want to sit in that space because it's
Yes.
actually impacting me. I'm
And
coming
maybe
back.
you don't want to sit in that space, but more so, you have acquired the tools
Yeah.
to reestablish yourself in
Yeah.
a sense of peace.
Yes, and I might just refine what I meant about that, just so that when I say don't want to, I mean don't stay there. Do you know,
Yeah.
I don't sit in that space long enough to grow, but
Yes.
you know when it's too long because then you start harming yourself, with your self
Yes.
abuse, and you start harming others with your you know what I mean, abusive. You start to be shitty with everybody and blaming everybody. That's when you're there too long. That's just too long.
Agreed.
Sit enough
Agreed.
to feel. I love talking to you. You're magnificent.
Same.
Oh, this is just awesome. I better let you go and have dinner soon. But I just want to for people to be able to reach out to you. Because you do this. Do you do online healing? I'm just making that up and assuming you do.
So I do. I will take one-on-ones, but for the most part, I like to do them in person.
Yeah.
I am happy to do them online. I just don't take a lot of those clients.
Yeah.
But I will. Yes, absolutely.
So you're
And
based in
so,
Florida.
yes, I'm based in Florida, so you can look me up under Amy the Good Nurse and on Instagram.
Yeah.
And that's really, I'm very active on Instagram. That's probably the best place to follow my journey. You can also look on amythegoodnurse.com.
Good. And why you went straight to where people can find you, and that is fantastic because I hope people do. But what I was going to say about Florida is if you were in Florida, because I know I do have some listeners in Florida, you could just go and work out to see Amy in
Oh,
person,
yes.
or anyone else in the States who can get to you and wants to get to you, for good reasons, of course. We're only doing nice and healing, so bugger off anybody else. And a lot of my listeners are in Australia, so clearly a flight to Florida is probably not on their cards.
No,
But
but you can come to the conferences, and that's mostimportantpatient.com.
actually, yes, we didn't go there. Most important patient.com. I'm going to say it again because I did say it wrong. Most important patient.com. If you are a nurse or a healthcare worker, please go check that out because you may think that you're doing okay, but any little traumas will be niggling at you. Please go to one of Amy's retreats. Where is the next one coming up? And they're all over the
So,
world, so just go.
Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia is a very spiritual community, and where we are having this is in the Marriott in the Plant City district.
Yeah.
And there are so many crystals. I think there's $2 million worth of crystals in this place, and the crystals are, some of them are taller than my house.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, I mean the energy there is off the charts.
Wow. So go to these, I do this sort of stuff. I travel around the world to go to stuff. It is well worth it. So pack up your bags, go over to Georgia and go and do this. And when you talk about crystals, some people don't believe in crystals. Well, if you don't, you need to get a little bit more in touch with them because they buzz like crazy once you
Yes, they
allow
do.
yourself to be open to the fact that we are all connected, and that means we're all connected not just to each other but to everything on the planet. And if you hold a crystal in your hand and you open up to the possibility that it's vibrating just like you are, you will feel it, and it is absolutely magnificent. So please follow Amy at mostimportantpatient.com and amythegoodnurse.com, and either just follow or go to one of the retreats, or connect, reach out for an online healing session, because Amy, you can feel your goodness through the yeah, and none of us are perfect, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're a saint because none of us are, but you can feel your compassion, your empathy, your warmth. You can feel that. I can feel that through the screen. So if
Thank you.
anyone coming to you is only going to get pure love. So I want them. I want people to come to you and feel that, feel it double, one-on-one.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
That's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. Thank you for still having the guts to talk about the past, and and to, because I think that helps other people listen to it and, one, be a bit more aware, but two, realize that they can move past traumas. And the platform that you've created is nothing but sensationally good and something that's really vibrationally needed in the world. So I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart for creating that platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I was not going to let you get away. Thank you. Thank you. And we will stay in touch, and I really look forward to it.
Yes, we will.
Yeah. Thank you so much. See ya.